in Vlogmas, everyone. Okay, I think that we should do a list. So we've only got these 4 days left, okay, of Vlogmas. We've got many things to do, okay? I think today what we should do is talk about runner-up favorite books for 2024, okay? So I've got a top 10, okay, and this is not the top 10. It's like if there was a top 20, the 10 that didn't quite make the cut. Do you know what I mean? So runner-up, like 10 runner-up best books of 2024. Do you get it? Is this a stretch? I'm gonna do it anyway. Because I had a hard time, you know? When you read so many books, you read like over 100 books or whatever, and then trying to come up with your top 10, it's hard. It's hard as fuck. And you think these other parts of it, these other 10 that could be included in this 20, they're also banging, and no one will ever know. So I feel like we should also talk about them. But we gotta do it quickly because I'm running out of daylight and I got Christmas shopping to do. For real. Okay, quick though, quick. So if you have any questions about any of these, I'm gonna go like as quick as I can. Any questions, any thoughts at all, please let me know in the comments and I will elaborate for you. Okay, let's try to go. First one, Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. Love T. Kingfisher. She's amazing. I'd read anything that she writes, okay? Like, I'm trying to work my way through her backlist as well. So this one is like a fantasy. I think it's a YA. I don't normally like YA, but I really liked this one, okay? It's a fantasy about this woman who is forced to become a nun because she's like a princess in this very small kingdom that's sort of surrounded by bigger, stronger kingdoms. So they have to be very diplomatic in how they deal, and they've got to sort of intermarry with these kingdoms in order to sort of like protect their people. So she's like the third daughter of this kingdom, this third princess, and she's forced to become a nun so that she won't make any children, which will then potentially inherit, because the first two daughters have made like very strategic diplomatic marriages where their children will then hopefully inherit. Joey. Anyway, the first daughter, she's abused and murdered by her husband, basically. The second daughter, okay, she's also being abused by the husband and sort of being forced to have like all these pregnancies over and over again, and he's like horrible to her, and basically once she has a son, he's gonna kill her as well. So the third daughter, who's been forced to become a nun, she's like, fuck it, I'm gonna save her. So she goes on this quest to get everything she needs to kill the husband. She needs like, you know, a hedge witch, you know, and she needs a bunch of sort of like magical shit. She gotta go to this hedge witch and she's gotta convince the hedge witch to help her by doing like impossible tasks and blah blah. It's sort of like a King Arthur type quest to get to pull all these sort of characters together and pull all this magic together and do all this sort of stuff so that it can all come together and she can kill the husband. So good. Okay, number 2, The Shining by Stephen King. I've talked about this already because I think I read it in November, so I've already talked about it in like a October-November wrap-up, okay? Stephen King is banging. I know that he's sort of like a divisive figure. You either love him or you hate him, I guess, but I love him so much, and I feel like I don't even talk about it. You know what The Shining is? The movie, I would say, is not as good as the book. The book, so good. Basically, this kid, he is like a bit psychic. He can like get flashes of people's thoughts and emotions and stuff like that, and he can like tune in, you know, with the world of the dead and stuff like this. He's very sensitive to all that stuff. His dad is an alcoholic, sort of. He's a bit of a wild character, but he wants to do best by his family. So he gets fired from his job. He's got to find a new job. He takes a job as the caretaker of this isolated winter hotel while it went in Colorado while it winters. So like everything's shut down, the roads are shut down, it's completely isolated in the winter, but somebody's got to be in the hotel turning on the heater and the boiler and everything, like looking after various things so that when they come back in the spring for business, it won't have like, you know, the pipes won't all be frozen and like everything won't be dilapidated and stuff like that. But it's very isolated, and historically the caretakers in that hotel over time don't do well, especially because the hotel is haunted as fuck, bro. so haunted. Anyway, this poor kid in this hotel being sensitive to, you know, the world of the dead, okay? And also the world of the dead is influencing the dad to make him even crazier than he already sort of was. Anyway, wild, love it. Okay, next one, Galatea by Madeline Miller. I read another one by Madeline Miller and loved it, and Galatea, it's absolutely tiny. I read it in Shorty September and it's so good. So the idea is, it's this myth of Pygmalion, okay, where he is a sculptor and he's disgusted by women. Like, he sees, like, you know, women of the night and sort of sex workers and just like normal women, and he's like, oh, they're gross, they smell, they like act immoral, like I hate them. So he makes the perfect woman out of stone. He like sculpts her and then starts worshipping her and her like perfectness or whatever. So then he presents all these gifts and stuff to this goddess, and the goddess makes the statue a real woman. And she's not even given a name. I think like Galatea is like a name that was attributed to this statue person like ages afterwards, you know. But now this story, Madeline Miller's story, focuses on Galatea and what happens after she's awake now and she's alive and she's supposed to be this perfect woman. But women aren't perfect, and fuck you if you like want them to be like that. Do you know what I mean? So she rebels. Love it, so good. Okay, next one is Bad Dolls by Rachel Harrison. Rachel Harrison is another one that I absolutely love. She's one of my favorite authors. I have, I think, more than one of her books in my top 10. So comment later, we're going to talk more about her because I love her so much. But Bad Dolls is still really good and I really liked it. And I had to sort of like bump it and I thought, fuck, I hate that. We need to talk about it anyway. So this is a story, like a short story collection. And it's horror, but it's not like super horror-y. You know, it's just more sort of like creepy and unsettling. And it's not based on like really supernatural type horrors. It's more sort of like the horrors that just exist in society and within our own selves anyway already, with like sort of like supernatural sort of elements. Like one of the stories is called like Goblin or something, where you have an app on your phone that makes it so that a goblin will like follow you around and make sure that you don't eat bad food. You know, like you want to like reach a target weight or whatever, but you love that cake, you know, you sign up to this app on your phone and the goblin like attacks you and like takes the cake off you and stuff like that. There's also another story where this woman goes to this bachelorette party in a forest for a friend who she used to be really, really good friends with, but now as they've like gotten older, they've sort of drifted apart. And the bachelorette now has a new bestie who's a bit fucked up a bit. Anyway, it's like just sort of like normal like horrors that exist already in life, sort of like, you know, enhanced by minor, you know, supernatural elements. So good. Her writing is so good. Oh, she's such a good author. Okay, Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith is the next one. Like, I've been getting more into Patricia Highsmith. I really like her. Jallo July, when we did like this sort of readathon thing in July to do with sort of thrillers, like this sort of like old school sort of noir thrillers. I did a lot of like Patricia Highsmith dabbling. Okay, but Strangers on a Train, so good. This guy who has a really rough marriage meets another guy on a train, and that guy has a really rough relationship with his dad. And he's also a bit of a crazy man, okay, and he's a spoiled brat and like rich and everything. And he like is talking to this guy and he's like, hey, let's make a deal, like I'll kill your wife if you kill my dad, you know. And obviously the guy with like the rough marriage, he's just a normal guy. He's like, fuck no, of course not, we're not doing that, you know, fuck you, you're crazy. But then like the guy with the bad relationship with his dad like starts sort of like pushing him and pushing him and pushing him and sort of like stalking him and sort of like forcing him to do this thing with him. And I think like, you know, the whole book is generally just sort of this idea that normal people can do extraordinarily bad stuff, you know, when pushed. Patricia Highsmith, she's just so good. Like her writing, so good. Okay, next one, Velvet Was the Knife by Silva Moreno-Garcia. So I read a couple of hers as well, and I think I generally quite like her, though sometimes I think her books are a bit hit and miss, but I really liked this one. It's like Mexico City in the 70s. This art student named Leonora goes missing, and her sort of like flatmate, or like the woman who sort of lives next door, Maite, she doesn't really do a lot. She's like doesn't go out a lot, doesn't socialize a lot, like she loves comic books, things like that. But she watched Leonora's cat once and then Leonora disappeared, and she's like, well shit, I gotta get Leonora's cat back, you know. So she's like looking for Leonora, and she sort of like delves into this you know, investigation for her disappearance. But also you got this other guy, Elvis, who's like a sort of like hitman sort of guy, like he's like a goon squad guy, where he does like beatings for political sort of stuff. Like Mexico at that time, I guess, is just really sort of humming with like, you know, spies and like an FBI and like, you know, like different sort of political factions sort of like fighting each other for power or whatever. So Elvis, he's sort of a bit part of this, but he's low down on the totem pole. He's just like a goon guy, but he's like really into it. Like in his mind, he's like really beholden to his boss. He's like, my boss, he got me out of the streets. He gave me a job. He believes in me. Like I'm going to be something one day, blah, blah. But then that starts to sort of all unravel in relation to Leonora's disappearance as well. So he does his own investigating in relation to that and then runs into Maita and they sort of join voices and things like that. But the characters are so good. Like the whole scene and setting and everything, Mexico City in the 70s. It was really good. I really enjoyed it, and I didn't even think that I would do, because like I said, like they can be sort of like hit or miss, these ones, but I loved it. So good. Okay, next one, Clear by Carys Davies. I love Carys Davies. She's a Welsh author, but this one, Clear, is not about Wales like a lot of her other ones. It's about Scotland in like the Highland clearances, where like the landlords of the Highlands of Scotland and the islands were pushing their tenants off their land in order to make it more profitable, I guess, with just like sheep or something. I don't know. I don't really understand. But this guy, there's a guy called Ivar, and he lives on this like remote island and speaks only this sort of like niche dialect of Scottish Gaelic. And he needs to be told that he's being evicted from the island and he's got to move like to the mainland or whatever and just like leave everything behind. So the guy who owns the land, he hires this random Scottish minister who's like poor as fuck. So he's going to pay him loads of money, this guy John, to go to the island, find Ivar, tell him somehow, you know, because he doesn't speak this niche dialect of Gaelic, to say, you're evicted, and then get him fuck off the island. So John's like, okay, it's a bit fucked up, but I'm poor as shit, so I gotta sort that out. So he goes to the island, and he leaves his wife behind, and he's like, okay, I'll be back soon, don't worry, honey, you know, like, give me a minute, I gotta go get some money. So he goes to this island. As soon as he gets there, he basically immediately falls off a cliff and into the ocean and needs to be rescued by Ivar. So John, this guy, and Ivar are sort of like living in Ivar's little hut for ages, with like Ivar looking after him and everything and like nursing him back to health, and John knowing all the while, being like, shit, I eventually have to tell this poor guy that he's got to get the fuck off the island, and that's why I'm here. But their relationship, as like, you know, time goes on with them together, is really interesting, as like John is like trying to learn Ivar's language. He like makes a list of like, you know, a dictionary of like all the words and stuff. He's trying to learn the language, and Ivar is basically starved of like any human interaction. He's so lonely. So he finds a picture of John's wife, you know, and he becomes really obsessed with it. He's like really attached to John. He's really attached to this picture of John's wife and everything. Like he's just like emotionally, like socially starved. Anyway, it sort of like comes to like the end of it, and it took me ages to decide whether I liked the ending or not, because like as it's sort of like going, you can tell really early on that it's going to end one of two ways. It's either going to end like a good way or a bad way. I'm like, I can't decide if it had ended the other way, if it would have been better, or if that ending that it has is the right ending. But I guess just in the thinking of it all the time, that in itself makes it like a really good read. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so good. Okay, next one is another T. Kingfisher book. Okay, it's The Hollow Places, and this one's sort of horror. I think it is horror, but it's like with a funny element. Like it has like a comedic sort of bend to it, where the main characters are sort of, you know, like funny in ways. Like they tell jokes, and they sort of like, they're like real people, you know, who sort of enjoy dark humor. Like their situation is bad and they sort of make jokes of it, like that sort of thing. But this woman, she's divorcing her husband, so she goes home to her uncle's house, which serves also as a sort of like I guess a museum of weird. Do you know what I mean? Like a sort of kitschy museum to do with like, I guess like Believe It or Not, like Ripley's Believe It or Not sort of things. Do you know what I mean? Like weird shit. So she's gonna go and take care of it for him while he's away, and also she's gonna get away from her like gross divorce situation. So while she's looking after this museum, she finds like a portal to like a dark fucked up Narnia with all these like creatures that will like eat her in like the grossest sort of ways. But she can't just leave it because now it's sort of open and things are like escaping out of it, and she's got to like seal it up or whatever. But she goes in there with her like best friend. Anyway, it's like funny, but also like, you know, creepy and unsettling and weird, like, you know, like dark Narnia. Okay, next one I feel like is a bit controversial. It's Boy Swallows Universe by Trent Dalton. So I went to Australia in March and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to the bookstore, I'm gonna buy like a really Australian book. And I came back with this one, okay, Boy Swallows Universe. And I think loads of people in Australia feel like Trent Dalton is not like real literature, and that's fair because I feel like maybe that's true. But as embarrassed as I would be as an Australian to like Trent Dalton, I think I still really do. Like, I really like this book as well. Like, it's a bit sort of, I don't know, forced emotional sort of like twat, you know, like, I don't know. It's like a bit wanky and a bit forced, I think, but also I just loved it. I just loved the end, and like I just love the characters, and like, you know, if I'm horrible and like that kind of person or whatever for this, but then fine. Fine. Like, that's me, okay? But basically, it's this kid. It's like 1980s. I think it's Brisbane in Australia. And it's like this really rough area where everyone around them is like a criminal and stuff. His mother and his stepdad, like, they're really good people and really good parents. But, you know, life is life, and they gotta sell drugs or like be like caught up in like the drug sort of selling trade or whatever. So you've got this kid and his brother, and the brother, something happened to him in the past, which you do find out but not till sort of later. Something horrible happened to him, and it's really traumatic, and now he no longer speaks. But anyway, you've got these four people sort of like trying to get on and everything, and like the young kid, he's like really smart and he's really kind and he's really loving, but he sort of just keeps ending up in the worst possible situations. Like, he ends up having to go and live with his dad, who's an alcoholic, and you know, he like, his babysitter is like this like renowned criminal, and he keeps running up against these like drug gangs and stuff like that. He's got to sort of like break into the jail to see his mother, and like all this sort of like wild stuff. It's obviously not true or anything, or even like remotely credible, but it's like got like an element of like magical realism as well that those people I think said didn't really fit with the rest of the story, but like I thought it fit. Like, basically what I'm telling you is this book is awful in the absolute best way, and I feel like you should still read it. Okay, last one is An Easy Death by Charlaine Harris. This is the Gunny Rose series. This is the first one in the series. I've not read any of the other ones in the series, but I want to because I really enjoyed this one. Okay, so it's this fantasy land, this fantasy world where it's like a Western meets a sort of futuristic sort of fantasy world. Okay, so it's like a Texas sort of setting, like a Wild West old school Texas setting, but also apocalyptic. Like, it's not in the past, it's in the future, okay? And everything in Texas, like all civilization, everything has collapsed. So now you've got this gunslinger, Gunny Rose, who does, as her job, she does trips. She like sends people across the West. So she takes them from safe places in the East and moves them across this like dangerous part of the West to safer parts in the West. And she is hunted down by these Russian wizards. Okay, because also in the story there are wizards, and the best wizards are Russian. So these Russian wizards, their Tsar back in Russia, he's got this like blood condition and he's about to die, but they need to find this like distant relative of his so that they can do like blood transfusions. So they hire this Gunny Rose to take them across the West to find this guy who can do the blood transfusions. But there's like darker forces who want to stop them doing that. So not only is it just like normal Wild West danger and stuff that she's got to sort of face down, it's also this like magical like dark force that also wants to stop her, but she's like a badass, you know? So like she's shooting them up, she's like, you know, she saves everybody, blah blah blah, she like does like crazy like Wild West shit or whatever. But also there's like a thing underneath where, you know, you find about her backstory and stuff, which is also like related to all this other shit. So good. Like, I need to read the second one. I'm gonna write it down actually, like right now. Like, I need to get a second one from the library in 2025. I need to read that book. Okay, that's it. If you have any thoughts, anything, comments, whatever, please let me know. Like, what are your best books or your runner-up books or whatever? Please let me know. I need that information. Tomorrow, I think we should either do actual best books, like top 10, or Anwen's best books, her favourite books for the year. And then after we do those two, so either tomorrow or the next day for both of those, then we do New Year's resolutions, and then it's the end. Any questions, any comments, any concerns, please let me know, and I will see you tomorrow.